The timing really played well. So again, I'm Scott Gerard, School Perceptions. Had the pleasure of working on your survey. So this is just a little explanation, a little key for the types of information you're going to see in the presentation tonight. We have background information, that's going to look familiar, it's what was on your survey. We've got survey and respondent information, that's a bit about who took your survey, the results and analysis, and then at the end, wrap up and questions. A little background about who we are at School Perceptions. We've been founded in 2002 to provide independent research with school districts. We've conducted over 3 million staff, parent, and student and community surveys for school improvement, helped more than 1,000 districts navigate strategic planning and referendum planning. So on to your survey, the fun stuff. So as Becky said, we did have a November 4th survey deadline. We ended up with 547 survey respondents for a 16% response rate, which is right around where a lot of our surveys come in. I would say pretty much dead on average. A good number. We heard from enough of the community to be really confident in the results we're seeing here. With that number of respondents, we have about a 4.28% margin of error, plus or minus. So just keep that in mind as you're seeing the numbers when we get to the results. Age demographics, as you can see, we have the most representation from your 65 plus group. We really like to see that. They're reliable voters. That group turns out to the polls, and so we want to make sure we're hearing from them in the community survey. Also good representation from 35 to 44, often parents in that age range, as well as 45 to 54. We ask, is your primary residence in the district, so that we can filter out a bit to make sure who can actually vote on a potential referendum. So 89% of respondents, yes, they will be able to vote on a potential referendum. That 10% no and 1% not sure, it could be staff who live outside your district boundaries, it could be open enrollment families. It's still really important to have their voices represented in the survey, but when we're ultimately looking at a prediction for how a ballot measure will turn out, we need to focus on those residents since they're the ones who are able to vote. By municipality, the biggest was the village of Partyville, but we did have representation from all of the municipalities that are part of the Partyville Area School District, including the town of Scott, which is a great name. 15% of the respondents are staff, and 45% of the respondents were parents. That leaves 55% non-parents, 85% non-staff, which covers the non-parent, non-staff group, which is your biggest group in the community. So really we have good representation of all of the sort of subgroups that we focus on. So we're really happy to see these kinds of numbers. Little reminder of what was in your survey on the operational funding support question. So the information about how much you were asking for, what that funding would be used for, and the tax made historically. So now we're going to break it down into those subgroups. And so first we have staff residents. So these are staff members who live within the district boundaries and will be able to vote. Of those, when we asked, would you support an $800,000 operational referendum for 3 years, 86% said either definitely or probably yes, 7% were undecided, and 6% were definitely or probably no. When we move on to parent residents, 71% were definitely or probably yes. That undecided stayed right around 8%, and then we had 21% in the no category. And then finally, again, that biggest group, your non-parent, non-staff residents, 53% said definitely or probably yes to supporting that referendum, 37% said definitely or probably no. Now, we have to do a little more calculating because those groups are differently sized in your community. And so we use some census data, and about 30% of your voters are in that parent demographic, and about 70% of your voters are in that non-parent, non-staff demographic. So what we do is we weight the percentages of support. So that 0.30 corresponds to the 30% that are parents. Multiply that by the 71% support that the parent respondents had. 0.7 for the 70% of non-parents, non-staff, multiplied by the 53% support that non-parents, non-staff had. And what that gives us is, if the election were held today in the Partyville Area School District for an $800,000 operational referendum, we predict around 58% support, so passing support and outside that margin of error. Are there any questions on that formula or anything before we move forward? Okay. Now we move on to facility challenges. So this is a reminder of what was presented in the survey as some of the background. Further, and then we did have a link to the full facilities assessment in there. So we first asked the question, not attached to any plan, would you support the district pursuing a capital referendum to address the facility issues? As you can see, you have a plurality of all those subgroups. So 80% of staff and 71% of parents, clear majority saying yes, they would support the district pursuing that referendum. 43% of non-parents, non-staff, which is above that 39% that said no. So you sort of have permission there from all of your subgroups to explore a potential referendum. Then we presented the specific plan, so the facility-based plan. A reminder of the projects at the elementary school, where we do a few different things. And then at the middle high school. So now we're gonna look at those same subgroups who we asked, would you support the $22 million referendum to fund the facility-based plan? Among your staff residents, we had 76% support and 11% no. Among your parents, 63% said yes and 24% said no. And then finally, again, that biggest group, 38% said yes and 51% said no. So when we apply that same weighting to the base plan question, we come out to 45.5%, so a little below that 50%. We did ask if you chose probably no or definitely no, what are the primary reasons, and we disaggregate for those folks who did choose probably and definitely no, and break it down by parents and non-parents, non-staff. For both groups, the leading reasons were the tax impact is too large and the project is too expensive. That tax impact being the leading one for both groups. Nothing else really stands out or differentiates itself, I would say, among the other ones from what we see on these surveys, but those two are definitely clear. So we did ask on the survey about some additional projects as well on top of that base plan for the facilities. So we asked how likely respondents would be to support additional funding for some projects, and they could respond very likely, somewhat unlikely, and very unlikely. So we assign scores to those and then calculate sort of the likelihood of support with 2.5 right in the middle. So everyone answered 1, half the people answered 1, half the people answered 4, you'd be at a 2.5. So what you see on this next slide is all of these additional projects actually came in right at the middle or above, which means that people understand the need for these projects. So I think that's a good sign that your community understands your needs, because all of those are above that middle point. And as you can see, there's the expanding tech ed, ag, and science classrooms was the leader there with 2.8, adding and renovating elementary classrooms at 2.66, and then we've got expanding the middle school gym and expanding the middle and high school kitchen cafeteria right next to each other, and then right around that 2.5, relocating and expanding the middle school office and elementary student services renovation. So we did ask for funding support for both the base plan and then with those additional projects, which totaled more than 40 million. So we put the scale at 40 million, and what you see here is, if you start at the right, that darkest color is the percentage of support within that subgroup for a $40 million referendum. As it moves to the right, the slightly lighter green then is 34 million, 28 million, 22 million, smaller referendum, not sure, and then finally no referendum. So what we look at is when these subgroups pass this 50% mark. As you can see for staff, that's at the $34 million referendum range. For parents, it's in $28 million. And then with your non-parents, non-staff, which again are the biggest subgroup, you're in the smaller referendum range. So we do that weighting exercise again, and what you see here is we took those three in the middle, so 28 million based on the percentages of support from parents and non-parents, non-staff, would not pass. 22 million, you're right at 50%. Smaller, you get up to 67.5%. So there is support from your community to do something. I think you saw that in the support for the projects, and you see that here in the support for the smaller. What exactly that smaller is the challenge going forward, I would say. We also ask, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? Part of those just slightly below our comparisons, but where our eyes go here when we're looking at those top 3 levels, because those are the folks who are often ambassadors for your district and are going to talk up your district, whether someone asks them about it or not. They're just going to say how great you are, and you surpass 50% with those top 3, and so that's a really strong score at the top there. And that is the presentation. So I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Scott. Would you just remind us the type of, you've had many districts that you have worked with.
Mm-hmm.
When you follow the data that is presented, like the report we have tonight, what is your percentage of accuracy that people will follow that trend that was voted on in the survey?
Yeah, thank you. So we are around, I think this year, calendar year, 59 out of 68, we were accurate. And so to add some background to that, that is for questions that we test on a survey. If they're put on the ballot exactly as they were on the survey, how they perform. So if a district puts something on a survey and our survey shows it would fail, and they change that question and go to ballot and it passes, were we wrong? Were we right? We don't know. We can't really test that. But they're responding to the data they got, so that is a good use of data. But we're in the high 80s, low 90s percentage-wise throughout our history of being correct.
Okay. And I just want to remind people too that the reason that we went this route was in the past, as a board, we talked with staff, we talked with community, but we kind of came up with a number and an idea of what we would proceed with referendum. This time around, we did decide to go with a survey company, School Perceptions, to get a better idea of what might the district support. And by doing a survey, this kind of gives us a beginning point of what can we now be looking at to present to the public. And so, obviously we'd like to do everything and address all the issues, but we also do not want to go to referendum, have something fail, and have to keep going back until we find that magic number. And so that's why, as a board, we have gone this route and really tried to be diligent and careful as to how we perceive the public's acceptance of this. I think as a district, I know Carla and I are the longest serving people on this board, and others have joined us since, but we have had a very successful referendum passing record. And so we're hoping that we can continue that trend, but we also want to do it where we're really looking at what are the needs, what can we afford, and how can we, as we've always been, try to be as good keepers of the tax dollars that are given to us to do these projects. Go ahead, Carla.
And I believe that our past referendums have not been marginal. They have been spread enough that it gives us confidence that we have answered to the people.
Exactly. As you can see, this will be one of the largest referendum, I believe, in our district that we would be moving forward with. So, do we have questions of the survey here? Board members, go ahead, Paul.
So Scott, can you roll back one slide? Or, I'm sorry, I guess it's two, showing the 50% on the $22 million.
Yeah.
So if we plug in the plus or minus accuracy, we hypothetically come to a 45% and then we fail.
Yeah.
Or
54.
or 54. So given that kind of number set, have other of the districts that you've worked with attempted to go for that number anyway? And then what ended up being the outcome?
Some have and some have not. So yeah, it really depended on the district. And it's hard to say that what ended up being the outcome. It really varies by district. I think there's so many factors that can go into that. Do you have multiple referendums on the ballot? Are there property tax reassessments? Are there other issues going on in the district that cause the referendum to be an outlet for people, good or bad? So it's hard to give a universal answer, and I know that's really unsatisfying. What I would say is, I think what this number indicates, these two numbers really, is you have permission to go to referendum. And I think where the work has to come in is in talking to your community a bit further about what exactly that number should be. But I do think you have permission to go to referendum.
Okay, thank you.
I know in the past, working with the board, with the staff, with especially the superintendent, when we have gone to referendum, we've really tried to educate the public as to what we're going to be looking, where this money will be spent. We've had public meetings at the different areas in the district. We've had newsletters, we've had stuffers in the shopper stopper. We've really tried to tell people what our plan is and what we hope to accomplish with it, with the dollars that would be accepted. I would anticipate that would be our same route that we would take again. I think it was very helpful to have Travis Huslett do the videos. I don't think he's here right now. Or is he? Oh, I didn't see him there. He's on the other side of Philip. Did an exceptional job doing little snippets of what's going on in the district and where some of our needs are. I would anticipate we would further expand that just to really get the educational component out there. Because we're hoping that we can then, people will know exactly what we're looking at and what we hope to accomplish. Other comments, questions on the survey? Could you please go into the appendix and we'll look at the tax implication here. And as some of you realize, probably two of the questions, the 5 or 6 questions that were weighted there towards the end, those were those like kind of a la carte parts of the survey that people were answering. This was the numbers that were presented to us as to tax implications that would be in effect with these moves. Obviously, this isn't an exact number, but these were working with Carol Worth, our financial advisor, giving us direction that way. So we did kind of have an idea of how it would be affecting the people within our district. Ben, could I have you weigh in some comments here? Just the survey or this in particular, please?
Sure. So having been through this process before and working with the team at School Perceptions and successful passage of a referendum in a previous district, I feel very confident in the accuracy of the data that we're reviewing tonight. Where I get a little more comfortable is just that line. Are we above or below that line for the base project? And I know a lot of people in the room are asking probably the same question. Will we be successful at this moment in time? There are a lot of variables beyond our control that may change in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead of us. And so it's very important to keep in mind that we do have support for a referendum, and I think the question becomes, what dollar amount does this community feel comfortable supporting? And so when it came to the vision of what we want, what we need here in Partyville, the board has been instrumental in getting me up to, getting me up to speed as the admin team, and just really being articulating what that is and what that can mean for the opportunities here for our kids. And so this is all part of the big picture. And so I feel very comfortable in the guidance that we received. I feel very comfortable in the team that we put together. And so going forward, whatever it looks like on the ballot, potentially, I know that we have a really solid plan.
Any other questions or comments? As a board, then we will have to look at, obviously what our target is the April election for the referendum. So we do have our work cut out for us, trying to meet the deadlines, to get numbers, to get wording, get everything together for that time. As a board, we'll need to decide from this data how we want to proceed, and then we will prioritize the projects that will be addressed. And that'll be working with Growth, with Findor. Do you want to add anything to this, Erica?
We do have some slides that can help with just framing next steps that help
Okay.
if that works.
Do we have any further questions, or if we think of some, we can always go back to Scott here.
You know how to get a hold of me.
And he's gonna
Ben
hang
and
out-
Becky
he's
have
gonna
my
hang
contact.
around
I'm
here
gonna
too.
stick around for the
Okay.
meeting, yeah.
I was gonna say, hopefully you hang around for a
Yep.
little bit here,
Yep.
but, that's why I wanna make sure if we have any questions. Is there anybody in the audience? I will be able to question if there was there. Go ahead,
You
Richard.
know, you talk about $100,000 home, how many homes in the district are 100,000?
Probably not many.
Median assessed
So you're
value,
really talking about
median assessed,
200 and 300,000.
median assessed value in the community is $190,000.
190?
Correct. For tax assessment.
That's including Marcellin and Scott, all of them?
Yep, for Partyville School District. Median assessed value is 190, not, the sales value is 380, but assessed value is 190. That's two different pieces. Taxes are based on the assessed values.
And I think what we do, when we reference 100,000 is just to try to get us into a frame. Cause we know that number is, just to try to do the math so you can figure out, as I did when I went home after one of the meetings and pulled our taxes out, worked with my husband on it, we, just tried to do a rough analysis of what any of these categories would equal for our operation, for our homes.
The 100 allows folks to do the math for their own home.
Yeah.
When we try to do median values, it gets really confusing for someone to try to backwards it into their own home value.
Okay, any further questions at all? Go ahead, Amanda.
Are any of the
Amanda Seyfried.
comments from the survey going to be made public, or is that just for the board to see?
Thank you for asking that. We did, at a meeting last Friday, Dr. Henninger, myself, and the representatives here tonight, we did talk about the comments. Obviously, somebody was representing you that day. We did instruct to go ahead with providing the comments to the board. They could not get those together for this evening's meeting, but we will have them, they thought by Thursday or Friday of this week, so then they will go to the board members. Dr. Henninger will have a copy of the comments. They were not gonna go through every single comment listed, but try to paraphrase and group them together under categories. So we'll be able to see, I believe the number that we were given was 64 comments were given.
There's more than that, I think.
Is that 64? Well, there's more, that's good. So then we can try to organize those and have those available. So if the staff or the public would have to go through Dr. Henninger to get the paper copy, or to get the copy of that. But the board members, since we did not have enough time since Friday, will have access. That was an additional cost, but I thought that would be helpful as a board to have comments available, so we can then, when we try to prioritize things, kind of see what the public was, what the survey people were thinking. So, obviously, people are not afraid to put comments in. I think that's good. Go ahead, Owen.
Have you discussed your project delivery method if the referendum is successful?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Your project delivery method? If the referendum's successful, then you're gonna design it and bid it out? Is it design, bid, build, or is it construction manager, or what are you using?
So Findor, we were hired as a construction management firm. So should the referendum be successful, Growth would design and everything would get bid out.
Including self-performed work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything gets bid out. So we really want local to have an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so whatever those local firms are that the district brings to us or that we bring to them that are on our bidders list, it would be any opportunity for any of the scopes of work would be bid out.
Carla will add a comment to that.
Oh, I was just mentioning that we did that same method when we did the auditorium. We all went to Myron's and watched the bidding process and where it went out to all people, or all companies.
25 years ago, we did one, that we bid, design, bid, build, and we came in around 30% less below the architect's estimate. It was design, bid, build, not a construction manager. I'm just saying, you need to consider your methods.
Okay,
And you also need to consider the state of the economy at the time, when to bid it, when your prices might be the best.
thank you for that comment.
If I can just add a little bit on
Go
the
ahead.
bidding. So when I think about bidding for us and being advantageous with growth and making sure that we're at market at a bid time that makes the most sense, we always look at that.
Okay.
Especially because $2.8 billion passed in November. So as you think about those projects that are in design right now, and I think, we are going to take advantage of as many opportunities as we can to get up to bid ahead of those, or after those have been let and the subs have hopefully gotten a little bit more capacity. So, I also think from a construction management perspective, I think, we've been helping obviously guide through a long-range facility planning and the communications and engagement that you've seen, and what brought you here tonight, hopefully, is some of the support that they've been able to
Just
give.
wanted to share what I knew from that long ago, and there was
Absolutely.
2 failed referendums ahead of that one,
Mhm.
and we ended up trimming it back to probably 60% of where they were at, and then it passed,
Yeah.
so.
Was that the middle school edition, were you involved with that then?
Which one?
That, when you said that the referendums failed before that, was that with the middle school edition at that time? Do you remember?
No, it was before the middle school.
Before the middle school.
Yeah, it was before the middle
C.D.
school.
Smith was the middle school.
There was a vote yes
construction.
group and a vote no group, and I was tired of reading about it in the State Journal every week. It was bad.
Okay,
You know, we came out of it okay, but, I mean, I think you guys are doing a great job, I'm just
yeah.
asking some questions.
And you know, we appreciate the fact that you're voicing these concerns tonight, because I think we wanna have something successful. And we
Yeah.
wanna be as, to do as many parts of the project that we can. Obviously, when we came in with the 40 million, we asked the question, and the question was not favorable. But that's not what we have to deal with. We will deal with, you know, what we feel, a number that we can educate and hopefully pass. I think it was, when I looked at the numbers here for the operational, that was 58.4% was your weighted, plus or minus 4% on that. I think that looks fairly favorable.
Well, construction costs.
The next one would be the facilities, though, is the one that is, yeah, oh, I'm sorry,
And what
Richard,
is,
go ahead.
and what is the referendum now that we're paying? 6 something
Oh, the
on
current,
the operational?
825.
About
Yeah, 800.
660 or 670 or something?
Yeah, 800, isn't it?
You mean the current one or the current
no, the current,
Yeah.
the
The
current,
current one.
there's non-recurring and then the recurring portion. Non-recurring was,
350 recurring right now. 350 recurring, and then there's 200 something on top of that one that will expire, without a successful passage of a, non.
I'm gonna repeat that so they can hear that.
Yeah, so
600.
I think it was, all I know for sure is that it was a $350,000 recurring that we built our base budget off of, and then we anticipate that the non-recurring portion of the current referendum will fall off after next year unless we have a new referendum to replace that.
But we have a non-recurring, we have,
Yes.
Yes.
and that's added to that.
Correct.
So,
I can recommend it over from that point.
Yeah, let's
how much do
clarify
you
that.
use it?
800.
I have it up from the DPI, if you want me to.
Will you do that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, just so for accuracy.
Yes,
here.
please.
So the recurring was 850,000 for recurring. And then the non-recurring in the 22-23 was 525,000. In 23-24 it was 525,000. In this year, 24-25 it was 350,000. And then next year, the 25-26 is 350,000. And that's the non-recurring.
So just look at what I said.
That's okay. Thank you for looking that up. Even looking at some of the numbers. Okay, other, Paul, did you wanna?
So one point, to bring alive the figure for our median assessed value, so the chart that Scott showed 100,000. If we bring it up to our median assessed value of 190, the operating portion then represents $179 increase to property taxes, and the $22 million portion would increase that median assessed tax bill by 361. So for a total of $540. So instead of a chart, Scott, do you mind bringing that chart back up? Instead of the chart showing us an example 100,000, the median assessed value in Partyville, that top number, instead of it, the upper left being $94 would be 179, and the number immediately below it, rather than being 190, would be 361. So that represents the median assessed value. And so the sum of those two, combining those two, it's $540. So that median assessed property value person would pay $270 extra on each of their 6 month. If they split their taxes in half, it'd be $270 extra and $270 extra.
Have Erica and Nathan.
Yeah, let's have Erica, as long as nobody else is.
And if there are questions, obviously, that's fine.
Yeah, if we think of someone as we go, please just raise your hand and we'll.
I'll just speak over here.
Okay. Alright, so as mentioned, Erica Freeman with Findorf, communication specialist, helping through long-range planning with our partners at Growth. So, please feel free and ask questions. It's brief, but we just want to at least provide some context for now that you've heard the results from the survey, what could next steps look like? And so we wanted to root you in those guiding principles that we established all those months ago. As a board, what were the things that were going to be most important to you when you started looking at the facilities portion of the referendum? And so it's just that self-reflection as you're thinking about that, the numbers, the $22 million, and what's most important. So I think that can just help continue to guide you as you have some reflection. So this should look familiar to you. You've seen it multiple times. It's that planning pyramid that we've been exploring from the very beginning all the way to where we're at the survey. So just guiding you in that process all the way up to that referendum that you've been very transparent about. And so this is another way to look at it. All the column to your left are all the steps that we've taken from facility assessment, both on the capital maintenance side and then also what we've accomplished from educational adequacy. The stars in the next column over are all those moments that you as a board have made or will be making some key decisions in the process, because every step of the way, we're getting feedback from you and determining if we're continuing to move forward. So we're here, continuing to follow our process as we get towards April election. So board would have to adopt in January 21st is the deadline. So there's work to be had now moving forward. So Nathan will take this slide.
So I think, Becky, you mentioned it as well in your earlier comments. Hopefully the district, specifically the school board, feels some urgency to maintain momentum. But I don't think you should feel like we are running too fast or we are not considering all our options as we move forward. I think Partyville as a district is in a very similar position to many districts, right? Rewind, 5 months ago, as districts were making decisions if they were going to put questions on the November ballot. And the next pool of districts that are now in your same shoes, considering if they were to put questions on the April ballot. So I think two key things to consider for you all, and it's coming directly out of the survey questions and then some of the results that we received, is do you want to consider, or do you want to move forward with the operational referendum, in April of 2025? And then secondly, and I think they're mutually exclusive in a lot of ways, but I think there is some strategy as to do you consider one or do you consider both? Specifically also considering that there is not a November 2025 potential for you all to ask any questions to the community. So we talked about the operational referendum. Is that something that as a board you would want to move forward with? And then should we continue exploring the facilities referendum for April 2025? I think, Scott, you highlighted that the results trend towards or lean towards considering a smaller project than what was identified as the base project for $22 million. What that means, I think, is slightly more subjective, slightly more emotional in many ways. I think it requires hard conversations and thoughtful conversations for you all as a school board. We will be there along the way with you as well. What is less than $22 million, right? It's technically 0 to 22 million. Where you're laying in the middle of that, I think, would be important to consider. What is a priority in terms of infrastructure? What is a priority in terms of other key components of additions and or renovations, specific areas in each of the district's buildings for you to consider? I think tonight what would be most helpful for the combined team is not, it should be this specific dollar amount and we want this specific language to review at our next board conversation. Knowing that there is time, and I think we'll go to the next slide here too, to understand that yes, there is urgency in this conversation, but you all in your regular board meetings have multiple opportunities built in schedule in some ways over the next 2 months here. So to be mindful of, as Erica mentioned, the January 21st deadline for you all as a school district to be submitting a question to municipal clerks. So the December 2nd board meeting is a regular board conversation for you all. We are prepared as your consultant team to be with you again if you want us to attend and you want to continue the conversation. Same thing for your December 16th and your January 6th conversation. We very much appreciate that around the holidays, with Thanksgiving next week already, as crazy as this is saying, and Christmas in December, that there are other priorities both within the school district and within all of your personal families. But again, we are confident that we can be presenting information if you direct us to continue to explore. As you have questions, as you provide direction, we are confident in being able to provide information back to you all so you can make the most thoughtful, the most informed decisions that you can as a school board. I think some key components to consider are different voting groups that likely will be participating in April, specifically parents, resident parents, specifically resident staff, but also specifically the non-parent, non-staff, right? Kind of those three groups that Scott highlighted as well. We know that the largest volume of individuals, the largest raw volume of individuals is in that non-parent, non-staff, but we should not discount resident staff and resident parents. High turnout in one or both of those groups could make the difference, right, on election day. So continuing to engage with all three of those groups throughout the communication plan that still needs to be tweaked, still needs to be finalized, but in many ways continuing the good work that you all have directed and you all have been reaching out to the community with over the last, year plus almost now? Yeah. At this point. So I'll pause there, because if there are any questions, Erica or myself, happy to take them. I know Scott, you hung around too. If there's some conversation that would be helpful for you all to have, that we just sit on the sideline for a little bit, happy to listen in and offer any additional information that we can as well.
Thoughts of the board?
Let's do it.
Well, I guess a question I ask is, how do we pull and see what the amount is between that 0 and 21.9 million? Well, we have time to.
So not in hard data in the same way that we did for the questions that we did gather, but I think there are some key pieces of information, as in what sub-projects showed more support and less support throughout the survey. So infrastructure, I think, was highly supported in all of our community conversations, right? We have our 4 pillars that we identified outside of infrastructure that we may need to have some an additional lens of priority on those 4 pillars of safety and security, cafeteria, food service, tech ed, and educational improvements. I think out of those pillars, adding infrastructure to that, I think there are ways that we can thoughtfully identify a project for you all to discuss and for you all to have conversations with your friends and family outside of the room as well, prior to a resolution vote.
Any insight from you, Scott, on that 22 and how to arrive at a number that?
Yeah, it's difficult, and there's, as we were just speaking to, there's so many factors that play into it based on the projects that you all have in front of you as potential considerations. I think what you want to feel comfortable saying to your community is, we identified, we heard you, we listened to the survey results, and we identified these are the needs. These are based on what we've heard from you throughout this process. These are the things we need to do to accomplish those goals that you all helped us create. And I think if you can say that confidently to your community and explain that, and explain how you listened to the survey results to arrive at that, that tends to be the approach that a lot of districts take, I think.
Not to get too far into the weeds, but do you find a value in the percentage point somehow and attribute the monetary value to the percentage point until you find yourself within the margin of error? Because if you have 50.1% and your margin of error is 4.38% from whatever's on that slide, you somehow derive your population to provide a value to each percentage point until you get to that margin of error of 54.5.
We have not done that. I think it's hard to determine whether it's that 22 million versus the tax impact. So where you would actually take that percentage point increase and what you're adjusting. That's not something we've done in the past that I'm aware of.
As I mentioned before, I think there is a fiscal component, absolutely, right, to what a revised tax impact or updated tax impact would be to an updated or revised project. I think there are also some emotional considerations as well. We heard from the community that there's not majority support at a $22 million project. So what is a reduced project? What is enough of a reduction, a significant enough reduction? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it something else? Is it the number that or the figure that our overall dollar amount starts with? Right, we're at 22 million. If we're at 20.0 million, is that enough of a move for you all to accomplish projects, as you mentioned, Scott, that are going to be really valuable for students and staff within the school buildings? Is that really important for that number to start with a 1, right? So it's 19 something or 17 or 18 something. Again, we didn't explicitly test that information, so there is some extrapolation that we all will be doing over the next 2 months if we continue to move forward, as we continue to move forward. But I think we can do that thoughtfully and not blindly with all the other conversations that we've had to date and with the data that was presented tonight too.
And one other piece that I'll add, Becky mentioned the comments, and I'm working on the common theme analysis right now, so going through them all and picking out sort of the common themes that are there throughout multiple, and I have not gotten through every comment to this point, but certainly something that has come up in a few of them is the idea of needs versus wants. And I think people really want to see that you have identified the needs versus things that are nice to haves, has been language used in a couple of those. So I think, again, going back and just being able to explain how you arrived at those things as needs.
Open conversation, do we pare back to a safe amount to get to what we have needed and take a bite rather than a significant portion? And I don't like to say, I mean, if we approach strategic phasing, I don't like backloading it. We're getting in that predicament, because that's not fair to our taxpayers either.
And I think what we heard when School Perceptions provided the feedback was it's 50.1% at 22.
Right.
So thinking about if you were to just reduce that significantly, your community is giving you permission that you're pretty close to that 22. And I think even Rob said he doesn't know that you need to be at a 1.9. He thinks it's that close, especially with that plus or minus 4%. So I think you're in a position where, to what the gentleman said before, construction costs aren't declining. They continue to increase year over year. And so if you're able to accomplish a lot of what your needs are now versus having to phase, because then phasing looks very different, right? When you're thinking about a tax impact, and if you want to build in capacity later on, Carol works through all of that. But I feel like you're at a moment where your community has said, we see you, we hear that you have needs, we agree with you. So I don't know that you're in a position where you need to significantly reduce and start thinking about a phase, because the reality is, I think we would all agree that what was on that survey were needs, and it's our job to help you tell your community that these are needs and here's why.
My question is, how do you know it was the dollar value versus the plan? Because people I talked to in the community basically said that the base plan wasn't what we were kind of all thinking. And so, I mean, a lot of us were supporting the 22 million, but not for that base plan.
So one of the questions that was asked was why would we not? So that was, you delineated out the people that said they were not gonna support it, and then you figured out the why, right? And it was that the project was too expensive.
The tax impact is too large was the top for both parents and non-parents on staff, and project is too expensive was the secondary one. So it's about that tax impact more than.
So that's how you're coming up with kind of the value of 22 million versus the plan.
So the 22 million is what we tested, and folks who said no to that 22 million, the reason they said no most often was that the tax impact was too large.
Were there any options on that slide that talked about the plan?
If you're willing to share, what about the plan is missing?
Well, just the community groups that we went to, I mean, some of the stuff that was really discussed in my community group was the cafeteria, and that was like an a la carte option. You know, the ag and the tech ed programs, that was an a la carte option, not the base plan, that's 22 million, we had to add into that. You know, and I think a lot of people I talk to in the community are willing to pay the 22 million, they just don't like where it's going.
And I feel
They wanted to go to the things that we all discussed in our community meetings.
And personally, I feel like what you say is very true of how I read the community as well, is you want to know the value in the money that's being invested, and you want to know that we're essentially putting our mouth where you're putting your money, right? And so I appreciate that perspective and your willingness to share that with us, and that was a concern as well for myself, and I think much of the board, that the cafeteria was.
It just kind of seemed like when we got the survey that we were all kind of agreed on, it's shifted direction somehow, and I don't know how I don't know what the process.
I think
part of
anecdotally
it-
a little bit was like some of the shore up of the air quality control systems, the HVAC systems, the age,
Yeah,
and so I think it ate up a lot of that,
The roof.
the rough, a lot of it that ate up a lot of that, and that was a big frustration.
Becky, you know, give a comment there
But-
too?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the part with, I think, when it came as an à la carte item was the cafeteria, but it was 12 million. And that also included moving the fitness center and, you know, and doing some other things in that part. I think that one whole kind of got thrown together, and that made it, people were just like, oh, it's a lot of money just for that one area. That's how I would interpret that, but I do agree, I've heard it many, many times that kids are eating in this, middle school kids are eating in this, I'll say it, stinky gym.
Right.
You know, and that's obviously to get, addressed in some of this. You know, some of the other areas, what we'll have to do as a board and work with, our admin team, our staff, is prioritize what can we do in that dollar frame, and really try to get as many projects out of that as we can, without just, as we heard in the past, and I know I've heard Richard say this at a few meetings I've been at, the Band-Aid approach. We wanna have something in the end that is not just, we're gonna fix it for now and not, you know, not look at it in the future,
Or not think that we've got more to do.
or don't think that we have more to do. So, you know, we're trying to be as cognizant of the public and all of us, I mean, as to what can be accomplished.
A couple of things that I would add, Becky, and I know there's other comments
Oh,
from the
yeah,
group
go ahead,
as well. But specifically to address the delta or what felt like a change in the project between our community conversations and what was presented as the base plan on the survey. I think as a consultant team and as a district team, what we were really responding to was the updated tax impacts and specifically the operational tax impact, where at one point in the past, we felt like there was maybe more flexibility or more ability for the community to be supportive of a larger capital project. But when there was additional information related to the operational need within the district, I think there was some refocusing there as well. So I don't disagree. I think there was a change, right? There was a reduction of the base project or reduction of the project generally in some ways between our last community conversation, what was presented on the survey, and it was really incorporating financial information and just additional information that we received. Justin, I think you brought up the point of thinking about phasing. I think one key thing that you all have put yourselves in a desirable position is that you have completed a full assessment of all your existing buildings. You have completed a long-range master plan for all of your buildings. So as we, even if we don't identify, I think it's highly unlikely that we will identify, right, a project that covers 80 to 100% of what we have identified in the long-range master plan, but being able to thoughtfully take the first step, whatever that step is, whatever that dollar amount is, related to infrastructure items and related to other upgrades within the buildings, and doing that thoughtfully, that if there's a goal of thinking about a short-term solution for cafeteria space, or if cafeteria spaces aren't formally addressed in a current project or in a short-term project, but we understand where those spaces might want to be upgraded, renovated, or added to the existing buildings, and we can do that thoughtfully, basically. Project A or phase one, right? Phasing in some ways, but not phasing potentially in as much micro phases. But I think the